Welcome to the Guardians of Hope podcast, where we bring together parents, nonprofits, legal, and medical experts dedicated to positively impacting children's lives. I'm your host, Cynthia Ramsaran. The purpose of this podcast is to inform and unite. Please seek advice from your attorney or doctor to address your specific needs. The thoughts and opinions of my guests are not necessarily my own, so thank you all for joining and sharing. Welcome, everyone. Do you know the saying, children are like sponges? Well, that is especially true during their formative years, ages 0 to 8, when they develop their physical, cognitive, emotional, and social skills. During this time, we as adults need to be aware of the environment that we provide and the tools we give them to feel empowered and confident. Researchers at the University of Washington's Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences found that children develop self-esteem by age 5, and that self-esteem at age 5 is as strong as that measured in adults. Let's say that again. That self-esteem that they find at age 5 is just as strong as we adults. So, here to discuss this and more is Mark Papadis, who started I Am for Kids. Mark, thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So, why don't we start by telling us more about your background and your work with kids, actually.
Great. Thank you so much. So my name is Mark Papadis, and I'm known as the Be Great Guy because of my work bringing personal development to kids. So if you have to describe me and my work in one sentence, I like to say, imagine Tony Robbins meets Charlie Brown. And it's mine and my team's mission to do for kids empowerment and personal development what the Muppets did for reading and for math. So we started everything about 15 years ago. It was 2010, where we created a program that teaches kids how to develop their own empowering I am statement. In other words, their identity. And that's designed to sit on top of the curriculum taught in second through fifth grades. And we will literally give this program to any school that asks for it.
Thanks for that. So, why don't you tell me a little bit of, or let's discuss some of the common mistakes parents make that can hurt self esteem?
Well, I think obviously, I don't think any parent purposely does things that are going to hurt their kids' self-esteem, or in some cases their grandkids' self-esteem. I think it's the little kind of off the cuff remarks or the things that you think that they don't get, but they do get, that you say, and it might not even be directly to them, that wind up making that impact. I have a version of what you had said during the intro in terms of the children are like wet glue, is that anything that falls upon them tends to stick and leave an impression. And that's why it's so important that we get to the kids at such a young age so that that glue can harden, right? So that when those things come, whether it's in those very formative years from 0 to 5, whether it's where we start off at I Am for Kids in roughly 8 to 12, but also works all the way up to adults. It's just so much harder to break through all of that hardened, poor identity when someone's an adult, though.
What is a can you give me an example of poor identity? Or maybe we'll get into that later. But for the purpose of your answer here, maybe it'll be nice to have a little description of that.
Yeah, it's basically something that doesn't empower somebody. It's something that brings not only negative energy to them, but negative consequences, right? You hear people say it all the time. It's like, I'm a loser, or why does all this bad stuff always happen to me? It's always the negative, negative, negative. And I'm not just talking about positive thinking, but when we really get into the science behind this, this stuff works at a cellular level, at both in the brain, the neuroplasticity, but also through the whole mind-body connection as well.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for that. So let's throw social media into the mix. And and unreal expectations that come along with it. How is this harmful or helpful to your cause?
Well, I guess like any tool, it can be both. I would say it's harmful to the cause for people who don't really know anything about how to have that identity within themselves. So they, especially with children, is if they haven't decided for themselves, is generally the loudest voices in their orbit is what's going to determine how they finish their statement. I am dot dot dot. So if all of the people around them are quote unquote perfect, right? You know, all those unrealistic expectations that you're talking about, and in their mind they don't measure up. Okay, now they're less than, right? Now they might even go as far as to say that they're a failure or a loser. It can be a tool to be used for the positive in terms of from my standpoint is to get the information out there so that it's available to people. So that would be a positive part of it. And then if we can actually get the kids to start working together, the ones who are working on their identities, and that's part of what we call the I Am for Kids Roundtable is all about. It's basically a mastermind for kids and their families to be able to work together and take the rising tide lifting all of those boats. So did that answer your question, or did I kind of dance around it?
No, I think it does. And maybe when you talk a little bit more about your program and who has access to it, we can elaborate a little bit more. So why don't we start there?
Okay. So in terms of the program, so it's been in existence for, I think we released it, and I want to say 2013, 2014. And it's available, like I said, to all schools. You can just go to our website. It's I am the number 4 kids.com. And there is a form right there where your school just has to fill it out, and we will send you the program. Um, Basically what it is it's me interacting with 5 animated characters who are all based on real kids, and I take those characters through the identity building process that I created. And we know certain characters answer the questions when I'm taking them through the process the way that we know certain percentages of the kids in the classroom are feeling. So now those kids in the classroom don't feel that they're weird or strange for thinking a certain way that they might not have voiced or even written down or admitted to themselves up until that point. And so basically, so that's what that's all about. I said it's designed to sit on top of 2nd through 5th grade curriculum, and we've had some amazing results in the pilot classrooms and the other ones. And since the pilots, where over 40% of in-class grades. So we're not necessarily talking about test scores because for privacy reasons they can't share that with us, but C students moving up to B students. And then the one that I wouldn't say surprised us that it happened, but surprised us to the extent was that over 60% of disciplinary actions or disciplinary actions decreased is what I should say by over 60% in the classrooms that was in, because all they had to do was be reminded of are they being true to themselves. And it was amazing how they just would kind of turn back into that state of being not out of line.
Understood. So you're attributing positive self-esteem with lower incidences in negative behaviors and higher instances in academic achievement. Is that right?
Yes, and I'm I'm a big believer in the old words have meaning,
Mhm.
and there are certain terms that meant something or mean something in a clinical setting that then wind up being somewhat hijacked or maybe bastardized a little bit when it comes to you know uh, you know popular nomenclature. And what self-esteem has become is a little bit more of just positive thinking, right? That little Johnny is awesome, right? That identity is more than that, because when any psychologist will tell you that the hardest thing to do for a human being is to, for any period of time, act in a way that is not congruent with your core beliefs. So if you haven't decided what those core beliefs are, if you don't have any, you really have no anchor there, right? Nothing to hold on to in terms of being your guide. And that's what we're talking more about is the identity piece, which to me is more than just self-esteem.
Absolutely. It's much more bigger than that. And why don't you talk about why a kid's identity and even an adult identity is so important?
Well, so, a little background to answer that question. So, I had an epiphany at the end of 2009 to stop what I was doing with adults. I had been working for over a decade as a sales trainer and a personal development coach with so-called grown-ups, right? And the one of the things that I would teach, especially to the salespeople, and it's something that I had learned from Zig Ziglar many, many years ago, is that a salesperson could never out earn his or her belief system. So in other words, if somebody was only making 20, 30, $40,000 a year, it's because in their mind, that's what they were worth. So that's where we always had to start with the salesperson first before you could start to train them. And I won't. It's a great story, but I don't know if we have time for it. If you decide we do at the end, I'll tell you the story of the night of the epiphany because it gives me goosebumps every time I tell it. So it's the same 5-step process that I did with adults that I do with kids. It's just obviously taught in a completely different way. So the first thing that they do in the setting is they're given a blank sheet of paper that just has the words "I am" on the top of it, and say, "Go ahead and just finish that thought." And again, it doesn't matter whether it's kids or adults, hands go up, right? It's like, how do you want me to answer this? What are you looking for? It's like, hey, there's no right or wrong answer. Just answer it however you think you should. So over 80% of the time with the adults, they answered either with their name and or their occupation, right? Either of which has anything to do with who you are, the standards you hold yourself, your core beliefs, all any of that kind of stuff. It's a label you were given by your parents when you were born, and whatever you're doing now to put food on the table. The scary part was when in our pilot classrooms, when given that to the kids. So one thing we weren't surprised by is almost every kid answered with a one-word answer because that's how kids answer questions, right? How was school today? Good. Right. That, right?
Mhm.
The scary part was that over 50% of the time, that one-word answer was a negative trait or characteristic, with the three most common being I'm fat, I'm stupid,
Oh.
or I'm ugly. And that's when we realized that, we knew that there was identity problem, but we didn't realize to what extent. And so that's why, literally since that night of that epiphany that I had, I literally shut down my adult business that night. I fulfilled the contracts that I had, stuff like that, but I dedicated the rest of my life to doing this.
You can talk about the epiphany. I'm dying to know actually now.
Okay. So I said, it's the closest thing to like an out of body experience that I can think of. So the at the time, so I because of my busy work schedule, I could never be the head coach in any of my kids' youth sports teams. But I was always there to be a helper, be an assistant coach. So my son was playing youth football this particular year, and season was over, and a number of the coaches had gotten together at a local establishment just to have a couple of beers, a little camaraderie. And one of my son's coaches comes over, and he started, basically going on a positive rant about my son. Like anytime I get a chance to get little Pappy, because we didn't have first names, I was Big Pappy, my son was Little Pappy. Anytime I get a chance to get him on my team, I'm going to take him. He's really coachable. He listens. He's a natural leader. The other kids follow him. He's just, once again, going on and on, great things about my son. And then I did something that we all do, but nobody ever admits to, where I mentally checked out of the conversation. And I started thinking, wouldn't it be great if every parent could have these types of conversations about their kids? It's like, what could I do about that? And then I realized he was still talking, so I kind of, and I re-engaged in the conversation. But see, here they come. They're starting already. I know that was the spark for what happened later that evening, where I went home, I got in bed. I'm in that stage of sleep before you hit REM, when literally it just came to me, right, like a lightning bolt. I was completely energized. It's like, hey, dummy, you know all this stuff. You've been teaching this for years. All you have to do is put it into a format that will engage and entertain the kids. And then it literally just started to download how it's all going to work. So unlike those nights when we've had great ideas and we're going to write them down in the morning, and we wake up in the morning and it's like, oh, what the heck was that? It was so good, but you have no clue. I got up, I went downstairs, I just started writing it all down. And I'm divorced now, but my then wife had come downstairs and she's kind of like, what are you doing? I'm like, shh, it's not done yet. And about 80% of what I am for kids is today came from that download that night.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that story. So, I have one more question for you. What are some other secrets that you have for empowering and increasing self-esteem and identity knowledge in kids?
So there's, I mean, part of that's actually a lot of that's covered in my book. It's called "The 10 Secrets to Empower Kids and Awaken the Child in You." It's available on Amazon. You can just look it up by my name or just type in 10 Secrets. The, the number one, and part of why I'm known as the Be Great guy, the number one secret is something that I've used with my kids, and now my oldest daughter is using it with her 3 kids as well. Is that anytime I leave an interaction with, whether it be, so one of my kids, whether it be a client, family, etc., is always be great. And what that does is it's a subconscious command to them to be great. But the other part of it is their response with enthusiasm is I am. And over a period of time, if you do that for consistently for 2 or 3 weeks, you will notice the difference in the kid just in terms of how they carry themselves, because literally you're working on those neuroplastic connections that get made between the brain and the body. And it's amazing to see some of the transformations just literally from people who've told me that that's the only secret that they've employed, and they can notice a difference. The other ones, I think the most important ones is to talk with your kids
Mhm.
and not to your kids. And if you involve them in the conversations, if you let them have input, if it's not just a lecture of what you're doing wrong and you shouldn't be that way, etc., you'll be amazed of the buy-in that you'll get. The one thing that I've had some parents that have been hesitant to try, but then once they did, they were like, "Wow, this really worked." Is especially when it comes time to where a child does need to be disciplined in some way, shape, or form. I don't want to say so much punished, but something that they know they did wrong, right? So there has to be some sort of a negative consequence for that. I will always ask, so what do you think? Asking the
Mhm.
kid, what do you think would be an appropriate punishment for this? And usually they'll come up with something way harsher than what I think or what the parent thinks, right? Because they know that in their mind, okay, this is pretty bad. I should probably ground him for a month. I was like, no, I think no Xbox for a week or something like that is sufficient for this. You didn't kill anybody, kind of thing, right? So I would say those would probably be 2 other ones that would be ones that people could start using right away without even having to go buy the book. But I would recommend that you do, and I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, why don't you tell us where to get more information about your organization and also the name of your book as well? I'll also link it in the description, but if you share that again, that'll be great. Thanks.
Thank you. So yeah, so as far as the organization, it's www.iam the number 4 kids.com. So iamforkids.com.
Hmm.
And if you want to find out about my book, you can just type in go to www.10secretsbook.com. You can either spell out 10 or use number 10. We have both. So 10secretsbook.com will take you right to the Amazon page where you can order the book. It is also available in Spanish. You'd have to actually look that one up separately on Amazon though.
Okay, perfect. Mark, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us about identity and how important it is for our kids. And I appreciate your time. Thanks.
It was my pleasure, and always remember, be great.